Morning, everyone. Good morning. This right here is my favorite view every single week. It is my favorite view, seeing all of your beautiful faces. And now that we're live streaming, now that we're live streaming our service, having that phone facing me always makes me think about the people watching online and what their beautiful faces must look like. So online people, post a picture. We want to see who you are. We want to celebrate you because that's what it's all about, right? Because it was our second inspirational reading this morning that got me thinking about all those faces on the other end of the video. And that was from the Science of Mind on page 263. I have an inner understanding of my place in the universe. I know that it's unique. The divine has not incarnated in anyone else in just the same individualized way that it has in me. I am unique and forever individualized. Therefore, I do not need to imitate anyone or to long for the good that belongs to another. All good is now mine and is now manifest in my experience. I do not compete with anyone, for I am and remain forever myself. This self is united with all selves, but always an individual and unique self. And that last line got me thinking. Here we are, all different shapes and sizes and styles, and each of us is absolutely, perfectly, wonderfully unique. Each of us should be celebrated and told how wonderful we are, told again and again until we believe it, because let's face it, most of us have experienced way too much of the opposite. We have been told how inadequate we are in a veritable cornucopia of hurtful ways, right? And being told those things has made it very difficult for many, if not most of us, to see ourselves as we are. And what each of us is, truly and plainly and simply, try as one might, inarguably, what we are is a perfect, individualized expression of God, right? I am that. You are that. Everyone we have ever seen at any time in our lives is a precious expression of the divine, whether or not we agree with their words or their actions or their opinions or any other thing about them. And if you struggle to find or apply the truth of that, or in any other principle that I try to teach up here, remember that, as a teacher once told me, one's lack of comprehension doesn't make a principle any less true. That little phrase has stuck with me for a long time. Just because I don't yet understand something doesn't make it any less of a fact. I may simply have to look at it more closely, have to practice it for a while, and ask questions in order to learn. So everyone, regardless of who they may appear to be from the outside looking in, is a perfect expression of God's love. Now, I want you to get real with me for a second. Better yet, I want you to get real with you for a second. And ask yourself, are you always, at every moment, freely, exuberantly, and fully expressing your Godness? Your kindness, your joy, your peace, your wonderment? Are you always, at every moment, grateful for everyone and everything you experience in this life? Odds are, if we are being completely honest with ourselves, and I know we are, right? The answer is no. No, we are not always. That is certainly true for me. While we all have experienced, even only for a few moments at a time, we all have experienced what it's like to live from this place of perfection. And while we want to live from this place of peace all the time, events in life and people being people-y, right? They can make it really tough to stay there for long, right? Miscommunications, misinterpreted intentions, and our wonderful, charming, helpful egos, they seem bent toward keeping us at odds with as many and as much as possible, right? But why? And how? Why does that at odds feeling persist? And how do we move past it? Let's take a look at that feeling for a moment through the lens of the teaching of Taoist philosopher Chuang Tzu. And I brought him up a lot. And you'll see why, I think. An old man and his son lived in an abandoned fortress on the side of a hill. Their only possession of value was a horse. One day, the horse ran away. The neighbors came by to offer sympathy. "That's really bad," they said. "How do you know?" asked the old man. The next day, the horse returned, bringing with it several wild horses. The old man and his son shut them all inside the gate. The neighbors hurried over. "That's really good," they said. "How do you know?" asked the old man. Then, the following day, the son tried riding one of the wild horses, fell off, and broke his leg. The neighbors came around as soon as they heard the news. "That's really bad," they said. And what did the old man say? "How do you know?" The day after that, the army came through, forcing the local young men into service to fight a faraway battle against the northern barbarians. Many of them would never return, but the son couldn't go because he'd broken his leg. Judgment. Judgment is the obstacle we're all hoping to climb over and leave behind. And we knew that when I got up here today, right? Because we're on talk 2 of our 5-week series on exactly that. Last week, we examined self-judgment, specifically judging ourselves based on the judgments of others and the resulting state of fear about people judging us. And that's a tough one. It's a really tough one, but tough is not impossible. In fact, because of who we are, we've got a unique advantage here, because what did that parable tell us? Everything is exactly as it's supposed to be at any given moment. And we here know that. The hard part is getting those endlessly grinding cogs and gears up here, those emotions ego likes to torture us with so much. Getting all of that out of the way so we can see the truth of goodness for what it really is all the time. And there's a really, really powerful book that Mona discovered 6 months ago or so? Yeah? It's called Judgment Detox by Gabrielle Bernstein. She said the other day that it's her favorite book of the year so far. And she reads like I do, so that is saying a lot. She brought me a copy, and I have shared a little of it with you now and then. But for reasons which are probably going to become obvious, it's a vital resource as we move into tackling judgment. More specifically, as we tackle the problems our judgments create in our lives and in the world, so that we can move past the impulsion to judge into the surrender of oneness. And I found this from pages 88 through 90 of her book, really relatable. She said, "Over the past decade, I've gotten into a bad habit. As a business owner managing many moving pieces, I have to make a lot of big decisions and don't often have time to do so. As a result, I've developed a pattern of second-guessing my choices. This nasty habit has far-reaching consequences. Whenever I second-guess my decisions, I go into a spiral of judgment and attack. I judge my partners, I judge my team, I judge the decisions I've made, and of course, I judge myself. I judge myself for moving too fast. I judge myself for failing to properly think through an issue or for trusting someone else's opinion over my own. To make matters worse, I don't let the judgment go. I have spent weeks, months, and even years obsessing over an outcome I couldn't control. Recently, I was presented with a major business decision I ended up second guessing, and this sent me into a super negative judgmental spiral. It involved a contract that obligated me to a significant time and workload commitment. I said yes to this opportunity pretty hastily, already slammed with existing work. Within a couple of days, however, I began to have second thoughts about the decision and went into a judgment cycle that lasted several months. I obsessed about it in therapy, complained about it to my husband, and incessantly discussed it with friends who couldn't have cared less. I babbled and judged and dissected. All of this was exhausting and frustrating, but it felt impossible to stop. Anybody ever been there? So stuck, chewing on a bundle of judgment and blame that we can't stop long enough to swallow, and so we sometimes end up choking ourselves on it before we spit it out? Yeah, metaphorically speaking. I know that kind of thing has contributed to many sleepless nights for me through the years. And she continues, underneath all the obsessing was a deep-rooted resentment toward myself that I didn't know how to handle. This judgment cycle was getting the best of me. And that last bit was a huge truth bomb. Underneath all the obsessing, the complaining, the blaming, underneath all of that uncomfortable noise about everyone and everything in the situation being a problem was a resentment of self that she didn't want to or know how to handle. I want you to try something with me. In your minds right now, think of some situation or person that you find stuck in your craw in a big way. Right? Someone or something, some situation that keeps coming back up, that keeps you awake or disturbs your focus. You got it? Everybody found one? Okay. Stick a pin in that so that you can get back to it later, because you're going to need to be able to find it quickly again if you want to participate in an exercise with me this week. And she goes on, even in the midst of this internal drama, I could see how I was projecting my own guilt onto others. I worked hard to justify my judgment, but deep down, I knew I had to let it go. I could see that my blame and resentment were really a projection of how I felt toward myself. Remember, we looked at what projection was last week, right? Check it out online if you need a refresher. I knew I needed to practice acceptance, move on, and focus on more positive aspects of my life. I knew deep down that the only solution to this problem would come from spiritual surrender. So I asked my inner guidance system to reorganize the story for me. See, I typed the words. I put them there all by myself. I put them there, and then my eyes say, no, that's not what you wrote. Yeah. And that makes more sense. I asked my inner guidance system to reorganize the story. I began to pray about it. Once I'd surrendered through prayer, my constant self-judgment and obsession began to subside. I felt relief and noticed that I was slowly letting go of the need to control. And what did we say control is? It's an illusion and an excuse we can offer to explain why we couldn't do what the universe is calling us to do. And it's because we were busy trying to do God's job our way, right? That's control. But then one night she says, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, tossing and turning, uncomfortable and fitful, mentally preoccupied with every little issue out of my control. And then, like clockwork, the story came back into mind. Boom. For nearly an hour, I laid in bed, meticulously reviewing all the ways things could have gone differently had I taken more time making my decision. I went down the list of all the people I resented for this outcome and even attacked myself. I glanced at the clock and realized that I needed to get up in 4 hours. And I said a prayer. Inner guide, please help me release this judgment and return to peace. I felt an instant presence of relief come over me, and then, and this was weird, she says, my intuition said, turn on the TV. And she did. And what was on? Was a televangelist. And the first thing out of his mouth was, do you ever obsess over something that's out of your control? He went on to explain that when we do this, we invariably judge ourselves for obsessing over the small stuff, which creates a negative cycle. He explained how we spend a ton of our time putting what we don't want on that altar. When judgment is on the altar, we get stuck in the chaos of what we don't want, and we only create more of it. When we try to control outcomes and focus our attention on what's not working, we actually weaken our power of belief. Instead, we must trust in a higher power completely in order to be free. Remember, you get what you focus on, right? Worry and obsess about problems, and you'll always have more problems to pay attention to. Focus on joy or peace or love, and you'll find those to be just as readily fulfilled. You get back what you give the most attention to. Remember our first inspirational reading this morning from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6, verse 45. A good man brings out good things from the good measure of his heart, and a bad man from the bad treasure of his heart brings out bad things. For from the abundance of the heart, the lips speak. Now, I should clarify. I don't believe that people are inherently bad. In fact, I believe we're all good. However, a person might feel bad because they're focusing on bad, and so they attract what? They attract bad. So everyone is good. A person who is focusing on bad from the bad treasure of his heart brings out bad things. From the abundance of the heart, the lips speak. Does that clear it up a little more so it's relatable? Okay, now we come here every week to this space not because we want to believe that something is behind all this stuff we experience through life. That something might be behind all that is, was, and ever shall be. We come because we know. We know, with all caps, that there is something incredible that's bigger than ourselves. We know that the something, that incredible power, that all-knowing great is, that thing we call God or spirit or universe or any of the other many names we humans have come up with to describe it. We know that it is everything, everywhere, all the time. We know that the thing which is bigger than ourselves is accessible to us at any moment. We know this, so we come here, all of us, myself included, we come to learn how to tap in, listen, and truly hear what we're being called to do, to be, what we're called to create, so that we can begin to employ it and transform our lives. We know with all caps that Spirit is working on our behalf at every moment to restore our thoughts back to love. Love exists all around us in so many beautiful, magical, perfect ways, and it becomes so clear to us when we stop the noise from screaming in our heads. In any given moment, we can turn within, touch that love, and let it shine through any situation. Love can dissolve even the most deeply rooted judgment. Love, in fact, is the antidote to judgment. I spend a good deal of time up here telling you to look within, that God is working through you as you to shape all that is. But what do you do when you can't touch that feeling? When you're not able to grab a hold of it? What do you do when you look within and all you can find is knots of anxiety and torturous questions? What do you do when you can't feel anything but whelmed? Stay with me here. It can feel over when you need less, or under when you need more. So we're going to go with whelmed, okay? So what do you do with this whelm? You ask for help. And I'm not saying call a hotline or hire an assistant, or that you run out to the most crowded place you can find and holler, "Help me!" Although both of those ways, all three of them actually, could be catalysts for a movement away from judgment and toward love. They could. What I am saying is to be still for a moment, quiet, and call out to that still small voice inside that tells you someone's always listening, and say, "Please help me. Please replace these thoughts of fear with love. Please let love into this situation." Or like Gabrielle Bernstein said, "Inner guide, please help me release this judgment and return to peace." And you can call that whatever you want. Some people call it prayer. Some call it asking your guide. Some people call it mindfulness in action. Whatever label or phrase best resonates with you is fine. You could even make up a whole other identity for this helper and really confuse people, which is fun. Can you imagine that conversation? So I asked lovely Rita Meter Maid to help me find a way, and suddenly that path was right there. People will be looking at you like you're out of your mind. Isn't that wonderful? To be out of your mind and inside of life. And remember what the Buddha said from our last talk in the Now series. If you're planning ahead, just plan ahead. If you're remembering, just remember. We can look forward or back without fretting or obsessing or allowing concerns about the future to constrict freedom in the present. Think about it. Even contemplating the future or the past is a function of present awareness. That was from Gautama Buddha. You can turn to your mind to find the wisdom within that comes from the lessons you've learned, while still staying in the present, if you do it mindfully, not distractedly remembering or thinking, or in the words of the Buddha, contemplating the future, while you're doing other things, right? Think with focus only on that. And when you found that knowledge that you were seeking, return to the outward experience of life. Designate a time and place where you can be still, meditate on it, allowing answers to come, allowing guidance to arrive. Then, when you found what you were seeking, or you realize that maybe there are lessons which still need to be learned before you've got the answers, you may return to and immerse yourself in the outward experience of life. It can be exactly that simple. Ask for help. Ask again and again. You can pray, you can write, you can sing it, but reach toward love to dissolve fear. And when that's simmered down, reach toward love to find clarity. And when your spiritual glasses are on and the prescription's just right for you to see perfectly, reach toward love to see the way. Remember earlier when I told you to think of a person or a thing or a situation that's been keeping your anxiety all angsty? You know, that thing that keeps you awake all night? And I asked you to put a pin in it so that we can do an exercise together this week, right? Okay, in your programs, you probably noticed a card. That card has a daily affirmation. and 3 tools for shifting out of judgment, which you can use at any time in any situation, not just for the situation you identified earlier. Because you'll find that as you work with these tools, you're able to bust right through judgment into perfect clarity quite quickly if you stick with it. There's the daily affirmation, which you can repeat throughout the day to keep yourself on track, and that is helpful. There's a prayer for relaxing into help and guidance. There's another affirmation for acceptance to stop that judgment before it starts. And there's the incredible tool to retrain our thoughts into only positives from A Course in Miracles. When we find a less than positive, a less than kind, a less than loving thought or opinion, or when we find a limiting or constricting thought pop into our heads, we immediately say to ourselves, I forgive this thought and I choose again. Use this card. If you want copies, let me know. There's, I believe I put some on the back, only a couple. But use them. If you want more, I'll email you the list. If you don't know how to get a hold of me, ask the one. Most people know how to get a hold of me. But you can print them out yourself and hand them out to people. It could make a big impact, right? But then you'd have to explain it, which could take time. So just be aware. But keep this card handy. Keep it where you can see it. Keep it where you're going to remember to use it, and use those steps. Whenever you need to step out of judgment, lack, or limitation, people often ask me how to actually do the things that I talk about up here. And the answer is almost always retrain yourself. Use the tools until you get there. And before I close, I'm going to turn back to that Taoist philosopher Chuang Tzu once again, because his parables are so perfect for what we're looking at today. The armies of Chen and Tsai were locked in battle, and Kung Fu Tzu was caught between them. For 7 days, he had had nothing to eat but coarse soup. Although much tiredness showed on his face, he spent the time singing and playing the lute. Outside the house in which he was staying, 2 disciples discussed the situation. Twice now, the master has been driven from Lu. He had to run from Wei. In Sung, the very tree beneath which he rested was cut down. In both Shang and Chao, he was faced with the most extreme difficulties. Now, here he is between Chen and Tsai. He could easily be killed or taken prisoner, yet he plays his lute and sings. What irresponsible behavior! Their words were repeated to Kung Fu Tzu, who pushed aside his lute and remarked, "They speak like small men. Call them in and I will talk to them." The 2 disciples entered the room. "Master," said one, "we are concerned about your conduct. It seems very strange considering that you are presently in great distress." "Oh, am I?" Kung Fu Tzu replied. "When a man operates in harmony with the way of heaven, his teachings cannot help but succeed. When he cuts himself off from the way of heaven, his teachings cannot help but fail. Looking within and examining myself, I see that I am acting in harmony with the way of heaven. I have the principles with which to overcome the terrible disintegration that I see around me, yet you say that I'm in distress. There may be difficulty at the moment, but I will not lose the virtue that I possess. It is when the ice and snow are on them that we see the strength of the cypress and the pine. I am grateful for this trouble around me because it gives me an opportunity to realize how fortunate I am." He turned back to his lute and began to play again. The first disciple began to dance. I did not realize before how high and deep are the ways of heaven and earth, the second one exclaimed. So, is good necessarily good? Is bad necessarily bad? Maybe the good things are tests, possibly rather difficult tests at that, and the bad things are gifts to help us grow, problems to solve, situations to learn how to avoid, habits to change, conditions to accept, lessons to learn, things to transform, all opportunities to find wisdom, happiness, and truth. When we see things as they are, we find a world of magic, the world that's been here all along. And we find ourselves wondering how we ever missed it. As Henry David Thoreau wrote, what is a course of history or philosophy or poetry, no matter how well selected, or the best society or the most admirable routine of life, compared with the discipline of looking always at what is to be seen? Will you be a reader, a student merely, or a seer? Read your fate, see what is before you, and walk on into futurity. Thank you.